Hello, friends, and welcome to our Q&A session for February 2023. We got some really good questions this month. Some of them were really deep, and so a few I answered on Patreon through messaging and all of that. And what I decided to do is to pick the two that I've actually been asked before in various different ways on various different platforms, and really devote our entire session today to these two questions because I think they're really good. So let's get into it. The first comes from Sharon, and Sharon brings up a really good point and something that I've thought about a lot and something I think a lot of people have thought about, which is when we are doing this work and we start getting connected with plants and maybe eventually in certain situations bringing them into our bodies, taking them internally, how do we do the work and not die? This is important, right? It's good if we don't die. So Sharon's angle for this question, by the way, I really appreciated because she's talking about how as we start trying to engage more directly with the plants that grow where we are, the ones that show up around us, we may find that there's less to know, less out there about some of the plants that grow around us than the plants that are more famous and more popular. So as we try to get into relationship with these plants in a bioregional kind of way, we might be encountering herbs that people are not talking about, or ones that we can't clearly identify or confidently identify, or ones that don't have a lot of folklore behind them or traditions of use in medicine. So even though they're a plant that's super common where we are, it can be like we can't find anything out about them, but we want to connect with them. And when it comes to a bioregional plant spirit practice, the plants that thrive and show up around us, especially in our shared spaces, so the ones that show up in our front yard, our backyard, the ones that we tend to notice all the time, or the ones that pop up in dreams and intuitions, are plants that we're trying to be engaging with, right? We look at it as that plant reaching out to us and trying to open up the gates of communication. So as we do this work, it's important to be safe, of course, and like I said, not die or not get sick. You know, the reality is that most plants won't kill you, but the sickness that you can get, I speak from personal experience, the sickness that you can get from dancing the wrong way with the wrong plant, not very much fun. So highly recommend not doing that. So a couple of things. First, always remember, and I have a couple of different classes on my YouTube channel about this, and one big advanced class, if you search for it, that we do not have to ingest a plant to connect with them. That the reason why I do so much sachet work, so much carrying of plant material on my person, keeping bits of wood and plants around my neck and my pocket, is because I find that just having the plant material in my energy field, in my space, is not only a moving meditation, a ritual of connection, but there is also absolutely some transference of magic and medicine. So when in doubt, please, by all means, work with the plant. Just don't feel pressured to internalize that plant. An example that I can give you on this is one of the areas that I like to go for ritual and meditation and just to hike around and be by myself, recently over the past few years has become kind of flushed with myrtle spurge. And myrtle spurge, where I live, is technically an invasive species and causes a lot of problems because where a good hardy stand of myrtle spurge shows up, they make the soil inhospitable for any other plants to grow. So when they take over an area, they take over an area. And so we actually have throughout the year in various parks and parts of the foothills where I live, myrtle spurge pulling parties, right? Where people will go out in basically hazmat suits and pull all of this myrtle spurge and try to control the growth. Now, if you've never seen myrtle spurge, it's a very beautiful plant and very enticing. One that, you know, as they started to show up in this space, I wanted to get to know. And fortunately, I knew that myrtle spurge is toxic and that, you know, ingesting that plant would cause a lot of problems. So what I did was harvest a little bit with the intent of drying the you know, the little cutting, and I was just going to keep some myrtle spurge on my altar at home to kind of connect with that spirit and kind of learn from them. And just in doing that, and I don't run sensitive to plants, like I'm the person that'll run in shorts through a nettle stand, like none of that bugs me. Just in doing that, I got a bit of contact dermatitis under my nails and on my hand just from a brief interaction with that plant. So they're really teaching me like how to respect and how to back off, right? So that's kind of how that relationship went, and that's how that relationship is to this day. So don't feel pressured to ingest plants to work with them. There is something very powerful about giving them a space on your person, a space on your altar, a space in your home. That is incredibly meaningful too, that you have sacrificed a small bit of your pocket space or a place on a bookshelf to that plant to hold some space in your consciousness and to hold some literal space in your life. The next thing is to try to make the research fun, you know, that when it's a plant that is harder to identify or it's harder to get information out of, you know, the really good materia medica books that we have, you might have to dig deeper. You might have to start by figuring what genus that plant is in, and then looking at all the plants in the genus and getting a feel for how that family behaves, how that group behaves, and if it's, you know, a genus of food plants or a genus of toxic plants or a genus of plants that a lot of people have allergies to, right? Solanaceae, for example. And kind of, you know, starting from where you can start and getting into it, while at the same time you're doing this kind of more academic research. Also, again, you know, carrying the plant or holding space for the plant in a way that is safe and can't cause you any trouble. Because as I learned from myrtle spurge, sometimes the relationship is about boundary, right? Sometimes the relationship is about not every plant should even be in your pocket, right? So they will teach us in all kinds of ways. It's not always about ingesting. It's not always about allyship even. Sometimes it's apotropaic and the plants are fiercely protective and that's their energy, and we kind of have this understanding between us about how that works. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. I know that it can be very frustrating, especially when getting a confident identification is hard. There are apps, there are books, of course, but I have found that plant ID groups online, on Facebook, are the most reliable way to at least get started with understanding who a plant is, so that you can start doing some solid research and making sure that if you decide to engage with that plant in an internal way, that you're not going to be dead. So there's that. So thank you. Good question. The next one that we're going to talk about comes from Rebecca, and this is a question I get a lot from a lot of different angles, which is, we do a lot of guided meditation, of visionary ritual, of internal imaginal space work, right? Which is all great. But what if you struggle with visualization? Or what if you are one of those folks who can't or don't visualize, right? It's not a skill that everybody has. It's not an ability everybody has. Everybody has senses that can be stronger than others. And when we talk about accessibility in this work, I think it's important to note that even something that feels really common, like the ability to visualize internally, can be super, super hard for some people. And for some people, it's just not in their wheelhouse. It's just not something that their brain is capable of doing. The reason that's cool is because when visualization is not easy for you or not something you can do, generally there's another sense that does have all the power. And because we live in such a visually centric society, oftentimes whatever that other sense is or whatever that other potential is gets really dampened and really quiet. It kind of gets pushed into the back seat. But once we scratch the surface and open it up, people often find that they can get to the same place that people who can visualize easily get, just in a different way. And oftentimes they get angles of information and experience that are not available to people that exclusively visualize, that are exclusively visual, right? So there is a superpower to be cultivated here. So here's the way I think about this. I am a very visual person, but when I hear other people talk about the kinds of visionary experiences they have in meditation, in journey work, I feel like I'm only halfway to where they say they are, right? So if I'm like, okay, this is what you say you experience, and this is what I experience after 25 years of doing this work, mine's not on that level. But I still come away from my journeys with profound information, lots of insight, lots of intuitive hits, lots of the material that I've used to do all the things that I do, right? So even though I'm not playing on that same visionary level that a lot of people are, I'm still getting success. I'm still making things happen. I'm still experiencing things. And so the way that that happens is that I have learned to personally, and I'm going to try to start using this language a little more. It kind of requires a lot of like sidebar explanation, which is why I think I don't do it. But I think enough people struggle that it's worth talking about. I try to talk about these things as an experience rather than a vision, right? Because when we say vision, it implies that we're being literal, but really we're not. When folks, even in the old lore talk about visions, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's visual. It means that it's an experience that happens. And so you can feel your way through some of these things, meaning that the entire time you are saying words in your head or following a guided meditation or whatever, you might be in a black room in your head, right? There's nothing going on, or maybe little bits of something, but nothing particularly big. But you can focus on the feeling, right? The experience of it. Like, where does the experience cause change in your physical body? How does your nervous system respond? What thoughts and memories and emotions come up for you? What ways does the body adjust? And what ways does energy move? So this is harder work, no doubt. Turning the body into a fine-tuned instrument of receptivity, basically allowing our nervous system to become a type of dowsing rod or pendulum by which we navigate these visionary spaces that we move into. So if you're doing a guided meditation and somebody's saying, and now we're walking down a path and moving towards a forest and seeing the darkness of the forest, and you're like, I got nothing, right? You can instead allow those words to evoke or call up feeling for you. What does it feel for you to be on a path? What does it feel for you to be in movement? What does it feel for you to be in the presence of forest, right? Focus on the feeling. There's a ton of power. Feeling is the root of all magic anyway. So really, when we visualize, the visualization is meant to induce feeling. Some people bypass visualization and just have feeling. You could also explore some of the other senses in these imaginal spaces. So when a guided meditation is telling you to see the ancient dark forest standing before you, maybe you can flip the script and say, what is it like to hear the ancient dark forest in front of me? What is the sound coming out of that space? And then, just like with visualization, what emotional response follows that experience, right? Because again, when you are guided to visualize something, that's the beginning, not the end. The visualization of something is supposed to evoke an emotional response, which is where the entire being comes on board with power. So similarly, you could hear something that then causes that emotional response, and it'll take you to exactly the same place. Similarly, you could think about how it physically feels to stand on the boundary between a meadow and a forest. What does the air on your skin feel like? What does the gravitational pull of the forest in front of you feel like? How does the atmosphere change as you step from an open space into a densely packed forest? And then allow those physical cues to open up to the intuitive flood of emotions. So there is no reason why it has to be visual. It doesn't. And I think that for anybody who struggles with visualizing or vision anything, just let that word be a placeholder for whatever sense works for you, or if you're like me, for the word experience, because I find that when I go into these imaginal spaces and I let go of the fact that it needs to be visual, and I just say, like I want to experience it, however that might come, right? I'm just an antenna kind of here waiting to pick up whatever comes through. So if somebody's, doing a guided meditation and they talk about walking down a meadowed path towards an ancient forest and seeing where the path enters into the darkness and the mystery of that forest, I'm definitely having some visual cues, but I try to remind myself to be as squishy as possible and to just experience that space. And whatever that means. Sometimes certain people can bring up a little more visualization for me. Sometimes it's more of just a feeling, and there's pretty much darkness in my visual, space internally. So we could do better, I think, about being more inclusive, when we talk about these things. And it is funny because that term, visualization has kind of become the norm, that we don't talk about creative feeling, right? We talk about creative visualization. We don't talk about creative hearing practices. We talk about creative visualization. And I think every guided anything I've ever done myself or experienced from somebody else has always been incredibly descriptive in a visual way. But I don't think it needs to stop there. I think that wherever you feel comfortable and wherever your senses fire up, or if you just step into that experience space, which I like, those cues will all still work. We just have to adapt them to our own magic a little bit, which again, I think leads us to some places that can take us really far into the work. So hopefully those ideas are helpful to you. Thanks very much, as always, for all the great questions, for all of the dialogue. It's always really fun for me every month when we put the question call out on the 20th of every month on Patreon to see what people are working on, what comes in, and all of that. I really look forward to doing this every month. So as you do the free classes on Fridays, as you do the advanced classes, the lessons, the courses, and all of that, write your questions down. If you have stuff that's bugging you, stuff you're struggling with, you can always send me a message and I might just reply to you. Or if I think it's something other people could benefit from, I'll put it in one of these videos too, so that we can share with everybody. So with all of that, peace and plenty. I'll see you next time.